Do you dream of traveling the world? Do you wish life would surprise you with one awe-inspiring moment every single day? Well, today I talk to someone who made that life happen for herself in a very straightforward way. This is Living Unconventionally, a show for those of us who want to ditch their 9-to-5 job and chase their passions around the globe. I am your host, Chris Pyak. My guest today quit her job to take her children on a one-year trip around the world. This experience led her to a completely new lifestyle that allowed her to visit more than 70 countries and get paid to do so. She famously said, "I once tried to write down the 100 best moments of my life and I stopped at 120. Well, today Maureen Moss is back on the show and she will share in detail how you can make a living from seeing the wonders of the world as a paid travel guide. So let's talk a little bit about how our listeners can make this happen for themselves. If you listen to our podcast and you listen to Maureen's stories and you think, I want to be a travel guide, maybe just even for a few years, to have the opportunity to afford to travel and see the world and get connected with people around the globe, not just as a tourist yourself, but someone who has to interact with the actual people there in order to guide your tour. What is your number one tip, Maureen, for someone to decide, okay, this is something I want to do? First of all, to see, is this right for me? And then how to go on about it.
Yes. There are some questions you need to ask yourself. Do you like people? If you don't like people, then don't even think about it. Do you like being challenged? Again, if you don't like to be challenged, it's not the career for you. Obviously, liking travel is important. I mean, if you hate travel, then don't, again, it's pointless. So those are the three questions. And then I wrote my course online so that people who have those qualities have the opportunity to study at home the type of skills, they're soft skills that you need for communicating with people, such as you have to present information as a tour guide, you have to be able to stand up in front of a crowd and talk about the day's plans. Sometimes you might be delivering a talk about a destination, maybe the history of it or the geography of it or something of local interest. So the communication skills are important. You have to even know silly little things that seem obvious, like how to write a notice that people will actually read. Like, the itinerary is changed tomorrow. Be here at 9 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. Something like that, that kind of thing. Communication skills. Emergency procedures, you cannot cover every single emergency on paper, as it were, but it's obviously on the internet. But you can certainly teach people what basic first aid skills they need, the rules of safety when you're riding a horse or riding a bicycle. You learn about leading groups and making sure that you've seen the weather forecast before you set off to walk in the mountains. And basically the skills and also leadership, how to be a leader. So all of those, they're sometimes called soft skills, the skills that are not actually the practical out in the field skills. They're all in my course. And so clearly that's what I think people should do, is do the course, because then they'll know what they have to do if they want to be a tour leader, a tour guide. But you clearly have to have done some travelling other than gone to the end of the road to catch the bus into town. You have to have some travel experience, and it doesn't have to be far and wide. It can be even in your own country, but you need to have some idea about, the basics of travel.
Would you agree or disagree with the idea that this actual traveling yourself, the reason why it's so important is not to know about a certain situation very much, but to learn how to solve problems when they arise, problems that you haven't experienced. So it's actually that you need to develop the skills to deal with new situations.
I think even more important than that is if you have travelled yourself, you know how it feels when you arrive in a different country and you're a little bit unfamiliar and you have that slight nervousness about taking your, maybe checking into a hotel, taking your first steps out into the street somewhere, be it a little village or be it a big city. What's it going to be like? That sort of a mixture of anticipation and nerves. And you can then feel empathy for the people in the group so that you understand where they are. You can put yourself in their situation. And unless you've travelled and have felt that yourself, it's probably quite difficult to understand how that feels. It's a mixture of excitement and fright sometimes, nervousness. And yes, how you deal with things. I don't know, say that you've been told that there's a bus that goes at 9 o'clock from outside the airport to your hotel. And when you get to the airport, there's no bus. So then you learn how to deal with that from your own experience. You're quite right. So that you can then, pass on that experience. Oh, don't worry. I know if we go to the information desk in the corner there, we'll find out when the next bus comes, or we'll find out that the bus stop has moved from right outside arrivals to further down outside the customs hall or whatever. So, as you say, the practical side of how you deal with situations is one thing. But I think for me, to be a successful tour guide, it's empathy with the people in the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I can relate to that. How would I go about to test for myself if I could be good at this job? My situation is like this, that I think, okay, I want to see the world for myself. I want to travel. I want to have experiences. But of course, if I do this earning money as a travel guide, I also want to deliver a good job so that the people in my group are safe and they have a wonderful experience and they go home and they really have memories that they will last for a lifetime for them. What would be one test that I could do for myself to figure out for myself, okay, this is something I could be good at, or this is for me?
I remember in the interview at some point, I was able to say, completely sure that I was saying something that was true, was that I just knew that the job was for me because I had enough experience myself of people, and that you don't have to have worked as a teacher. It doesn't matter where you work. If you've worked in a job where you're interacting with people, and if you're coming from what we were saying earlier about that way of being, of relating to people, and I suppose service as well, wanting to be of service to other people, then the worst tour guides are the ones who boast about their own experiences all the time. They talk about when I was doing this and where I went, those awful travel bores that you often overhear or you meet sometimes when you're traveling. So I guess it would be, I'm at a loss, to be honest with you, to say one particular thing that you could relate to that would make you feel, yes, I know I could do this job. It's a combination of all of those things. Yeah.
What I heard from what you said was now that if you would have to pick one, then it would be the ability to connect with people and communicate and have practiced this in your life in whichever form.
Better said than I said it.
Oh, thank you. I don't think it's true, but I take it as a compliment anyway. I'm shameless that way. Maureen, what I wonder, can't help but wonder because I'm German, is there any certification required to work as a travel guide? How do potential employers look at you when they choose someone to work as a travel guide with them?
The type of questions that I was asked at my interview, they're looking for not only your answers, but how you respond to pressure. After I was told that I had the job, one of the things the interviewer said to me was, what was good is that you didn't change your mind. You didn't hesitate. I pressurized you. I almost threatened you. Do you really think you can do this? You're going to be in the Sun newspaper and bring our company into disrepute. But he said, I couldn't pressurize you into changing your mind. And he was very impressed with that. He said that that's very important quality for a tour leader, because you're the leader. If you make a decision, you stick to it, unless completely different extenuating circumstances crop up, but you make the decision and you don't allow others, and especially not people in the group, to have you change your mind. So that was quite an important, that was an eye-opener for me. That is something I hadn't thought of, but it's true. Sometimes the group they send a delegation and say, look, there's 6 of us. We really don't want to go to that temple. We want to go to that garden instead. Could we change the itinerary? And but there's 6 of you. There's 14 people in this group. I can't just make decisions like that without the whole group being involved. And then it's much more. There's much more involved to do with the timing and the bus driver's hours and how long he's, all that sort of stuff that the group don't necessarily take into account. So coping under pressure, really. I guess, I know it sounds a stupid thing, I've just thought of this, but what you've just asked me, it sometimes feels a little bit like, you watch these quiz things on television. I don't watch them that much, but when I do, I'm amazed at how quickly people can think. Sometimes I know the answer, but I'm almost always take much longer to remember it than the people who are on the show. And so I think that's something as well. It's being able to think quickly. That's quite important. You sometimes only have minutes to make a snap decision. And that's another very important thing, another quality. Yeah.
Yeah, and then not doubt yourself, but see it through. Yeah, it's very funny in the army. You learn when you leading your platoon or somewhere, and you get lost in the wood. What you do as a leader is you let them march faster, so they can't think. So you take up the speed, and then you move on until you figured out what to do. And that's in their interest, because you help them to stay safe and feel safe. And once you figured out where to go, then that's what you do. So let's say I got now my first job as a travel guide. What should I expect? How is the actual work like compared to my romantic idea from? What is the most important thing I should know?
It's 24/7. So, you may not actually have time to enjoy the destination that you're visiting because you will be so busy. There's a lot more to it, but you always have to appear as if you are on holiday yourself. So the group might say to you, this must be a fabulous job because you get to be on holiday all the time. And you say, yes. And then you go back to your room and it's 10 o'clock at night and you're tired out and you have a whole lot of paperwork to fill in. You have telephone calls maybe to make first thing in the morning. So you have to get up 2 or 3 hours before everybody else. And, there's a lot of background work. So it is not an easy job. And, one of the reasons that the Wanderlust magazine, they have an annual world tour guide competition each year. And it's not really a competition. People nominate tour guides. And I think they started it about maybe 10 years ago. I'm not terribly sure. But that's people recognizing the skills that the group normally don't see. So there's a lot of preparation work.
How does a normal schedule, a normal work day look like for a tour guide?
I'm trying to remember now an example day. So one of the things that I found, it took me a long time to get used to, is the alarm goes and your first instinct is, what country am I in and what day of the tour is it? And because I went into various different countries, I could be in China one week and then I could be in Brazil another week. So it's, whereabouts am I and what day of the tour is it? Because depending on the day of the tour, the things that you have to get done first thing in the morning. So do I have to go and pick up tickets for a bus journey somewhere? Do I need to talk to the hotel about paying the invoice? So different tour companies have different ways of paying the bill. Occasionally, you actually have the money and you keep it in the hotel safe, just in case anybody didn't know that. You never have money in your room. You always have it in the hotel safe. Of course, if you're camping, that's a different ballgame. You have to either find a camp office where you can keep it safe, or you just have to hang on to it in a very secure place on your own body. You've got tasks to do, and then you need to remember what time. You might be giving a daily briefing to tell the group what they're going to see that day, to remind them what they need to bring with them. They'll always need to bring water. Do they need to bring an extra layer because it might be cold if we're going a bit higher in the atmosphere? What sort of shoes? Are we going to be spending a lot of time sitting on a vehicle today, or are we going to be walking around, in which case very comfortable shoes? Mind you, that's in my world, that's always important. You mean anyone who goes on tour, a type of tour where you're doing adventure activities with open-toed sandals and high heels, for example. I had that happen, to be honest, Chris, if I could digress for a minute. I had a group of people walking in the Alpujarras in the south of Spain. Mm-hmm. And this lovely lady, she'd said she'd practiced hiking to get used to walking. I thought, where do you walk? She said, I walk along to the mall every morning, and it takes me about 20 minutes. And I said, that's on the flat road. She said, yes. And I looked at her, she had cork high heel sandals on. And I said, you have got your walking boots, haven't you? And she said, no, I thought we picked them up at the mall here. I said, we're going into a village in the mountains. There is no mall. There is only a spit and sawdust bar where the local men go to smoke and watch football on the television. And there is a tiny grocery where you can buy bread and ham and cheese to take with you on your daily hikes and water. But there's no, and I had to ask them to leave. That's one of the hardest things, is when you have to send people home. I've only had to do that 2 or 3 times, and one of them was for that reason, that they'd come on a hiking holiday in the mountains with no hiking gear at all.
That's really weird.
Yeah. So in the morning, then back to that. So you check that you've got your daily briefing notes with all the timings, what they need to bring, what they can expect. Remind them to take whatever cameras or whatever that nowadays people just usually have their phones. And then make it down to breakfast. You probably won't have had any yourself, but you go and say hello to the group and then meet them and give the daily briefing, and then meet them outside. Another very important thing to work out is how long to allow when the group go off on their own. The most important thing to remember is to tell them exactly what time and exactly where they have to be back to meet the rest of the group. So you have to plan that in advance, so you talk to the driver. You're liaising with other people all the time, Chris. You're talking to the hotel people, you're talking to the driver, you're talking to the local, because you also will have a local guide in a lot of places. So you're the tour leader, and your overall responsibility is for getting the group from A to B and the logistics of the whole tour. But if you're working as a local guide, you have expertise. You know all about that particular, it might be the rice fields in Longsheng in China, or it might be the city of Kiev, or wherever your local guide will know much more about that than you possibly can. You can't know everything about all the different places you're going to work in. So you liaise with the local guide about where you're going to go. Sometimes that can be tricky. That's another negotiating skill you need. Is, for example, when I first worked in China, the local guides were encouraged to take groups to big state-run restaurants and to always include visits to silk factories or carpet factories or terracotta warrior replica factories, that sort of replica factories. And depending on your group, they may not be interested in that. So you're negotiating with the local guide as to what to include in the day's activities.
Did you experience, or is that something that you experienced, that local partners tried to use the fact that you are there now, that you are with your group, that you are under pressure to I say friendly, renegotiate the terms?
Sometimes they do, but not often. That hardly ever happened to me, because the tour company that I was working with, for example, in China, they had a really good relationship with the local. I mean, they're now called DMC, destination management companies. In those days, we just called them the local agent, and they will have negotiated the hotel rooms and the transport, and they will also have recruited the local guides, the local experts who will give you the information about each particular site or destination. And very occasionally, the local company might try to renegotiate with the tour guide, but the company I worked for, mostly, that never happened because they had such a good relationship with the tour operator that they didn't try to pressurize me into anything.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. For me, as someone who wants to work as a tour guide, what is the best criteria to check out a potential employer so that I can also feel safe working together with this employer?
That's a very good question, actually. Word of mouth sometimes. For example, in Africa, there were some quite dodgy people running tour companies who weren't paying the guides, they weren't paying the drivers, they weren't maintaining the trucks, for example, on overland journeys and things like that. So if you talk to other guides, I have had many a conversation on train rides in China about different tour operators with guides, because you can almost recognize each other from the way we even walk a little bit quicker than everybody else, and you see talking in a group, the way that you can tell who's the tour guide or the tour leader, and then sort of try and get together with them and compare notes. You know, such and such a company is really rubbish to work for, or such and such a company is fantastic to work for. So it's sort of, you could do it that way, but obviously that doesn't help you if you're not around other guides. Tricky one.
It's something you have to figure out along the way, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose trial and error, but I mean, the thing is, I don't think you're ever. Well, I might be wrong here. I don't know, but I've never heard of anybody signing a contract that says you've got to work for us for 5 years, and you haven't got anything to say about it. So, I mean, usually you're written for a certain amount of time or a certain number of tours, and well, you just negotiate with them and say, look, I'm not happy. I don't like the fact that you don't pay me on time, or whatever.
Yeah. Which brings me to a question that's, of course, also quite interesting if you want to work as a tour guide to see the world. And that is, how does compensation work? What do they pay? What do they don't pay? Is there something I have to pay myself? What can I expect?
Now, when you say compensation, do you mean to people on the tour? Or
yeah. For me, say I would be hired as a tour guide by a company, and they would send me, I don't know, to South America to guide a tour there. Would they pay for my flight? Would they pay for my hotel? Would they pay for my food? Would they pay me for my work as well?
Okay, I'm so sorry. I thought you meant compensation for if you have an accident or something like that. Okay. So, yes, obviously each tour company is different, but usually your flight is, or whatever travel it is paid for by the tour company. Your accommodation is paid for by the tour company. Your food, which is either just breakfast or breakfast and an evening meal, depending on the country, is usually paid for by the company. Your alcohol is almost never paid for by the company. It's much easier actually if you don't drink alcohol at all when you're working as a tour guide, although of course it's not possible to always keep to that, but you certainly don't want to be working first thing in the morning with a hangover. So what else? Your expenses might be out-of-pocket things like you might need to top up the first aid kit. That's very often the tour leader's responsibility. You always have to carry a first aid kit with you on the tour. So if you have to use some bandages or something, or cream or whatever it is, you have to replenish that on tour while you're away, and then you put a claim in for that petty cash expenditure that you've had for that kind of thing. And similarly, maybe some tickets you have to get on site. You can't get them in advance. So you might have to go, for example, the Alhambra in Granada. You might have to go and collect tickets first thing in the morning to give to the group when they arrive later on in the day. And that would come out of cash money that you would be carrying with you. So if you don't have cash for that kind of thing, then you normally fill in an expenses claim at the end of the agreed period, which is usually the tour, at the end of the tour. Some cases it might be every month. It's usually the end of the tour, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. And for those of our listeners who want to learn a little bit more about this and maybe to figure out how to become a really great tour guide, you created a course. Tell us a little bit before we finish about your course, what people can learn there and how it will help them to start their career in this area, or maybe not even a career, but a few years of paid for travel.
Well, I've divided the course materials into 5 sections. The first one is called First Aid and on tour, and Health on tour. So it's recognizing the symptoms of a serious disease as opposed to a bad cold, for example. It's knowing what goes in a first aid kit. Basically, it's general first aid, and I had to update it recently because the sort of international agreed norms changed. So I updated it with the help of a friend who is a nurse practitioner. And so we added some new material to that section. So that's the first section. The second section is about communication, and that covers everything from written communication to delivering briefings and that sort of thing. Next one is about leadership. It gives you the skills that at least you know how to present yourself as a leader, so that you stand out as a leader, so that you're somebody that people feel they can trust, and they will also do as you suggest rather as you tell them, rather than try and argue with you, that kind of thing. So somebody that they will respect and trust and feel comfortable with. And a lot of that is very, very dependent on how the impression that you give on the first day, the first 24 hours. People often form an impression then. And if they don't feel safe with you or they don't like you, it could give you problems later. So it's really important to nail that first 24 hours of communication. So then the emergency section, that contains lots of different scenarios and lots of different communication areas where it's not just about you as the leader, but it's like how you resolve conflict and all that sort of thing. Because, sometimes I've known people, married couples, who virtually end up getting divorced after they've been on a tour, when they argue the whole time, which spoils the tour for everybody.
I can imagine.
So what have I done? Safety, communication, presentation and leadership and emergencies. Yeah, those are the 5 modules. There's about 100 lessons in it, but they're very short. They're often just 1 page. They're very short. At the end of each of the modules, there's a test that you do online, and you have 4 choices. So it's multiple choice, and it's a question that's based on something that you've learned in the unit, or the module as I call them, yeah. And you do that online, and if you get it right, then you can print off a certificate which lists all the skills that you've learned. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the material of the course and the way that it operates.
Sounds awesome. Maureen, what was the nicest feedback that you got so far for your course? Did you hear back from students who took your course and later started to work as a travel guide?
Yes. Well, the only one I can think of right at the moment is the most recent one, as is often the case. And she said that she learned so much about all the different areas. She particularly liked the first aid one because she found that really helpful, and that it had helped her to move into areas that went beyond taking a small group around a local site to being able to offer her services to bigger organizations like worldwide operators, and then to promote her country. That was the thing that was so lovely. She felt that that through doing my course, she could have her country be promoted all over the world, because people were coming then from different countries on the international tour operators. So if it's somebody working locally, sometimes this particular person wasn't getting badly paid, but sometimes in some countries, the local tour guide might be getting quite badly paid because they're only taking tours for local agents or local DMCs, as they're now called. To do the course, then they're able to say to an international tour operator, look, you can now send me to be a tour guide for your clients. Say they're in Nepal, I can lead tours for people in China now, if you like. So she was thrilled that she was able to have more people from different countries come to her own country. Remember the exact wording, but that was basically it, that she had found it very useful. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful, Maureen. Where can people find you?
Oh.
Under which domain do they find you?
My course is www.tourguidecourse.com.
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 Maureen, thank you very much for your time. Talking to you was a real pleasure. I would not be surprised if a few years from now, maybe we have a third interview to see what happened until then.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great.
That's lovely. I love talking about being a tour guide.
That was our interview with Maureen Moss. And hey, I have a feeling it's decision time for many of us, because becoming a travel guide is a very straightforward way for you to actually do what you dream and travel the world and see the wonders of the world every single day. So why don't you take the opportunity and head over to Maureen Moss's website, which is travelguidecourse.com, and check out how she can help you to actually make this lifestyle a reality for yourself. And hey, let me know how it went for you. I'm curious to hear about your travel adventures and about your dreams to build a life for yourself. Join our Facebook community at livingunconventionally.com/Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, because every single week we interview either an aspiring adventure seeker who wishes to travel the world and see the wonders of the world, and we talk about how she or he can make this dream happen for herself. Or we interview someone who already achieved this goal, and we talk about the adventures that they had, the most inspiring moments of their life, and also very concretely what helped them to make their dream, to chase their passions around the world, a reality. I'm your host, Pyak, and this was Living Unconventionally. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, and we hear each other again next week.